Hi, I'm Stephen Hanna from Archery Supplies, and today I'm going to talk about shares. And you're going to say, well, what shares got to do with archery? Well, as an owner of an archery shop, you've got stock, and stock costs money. So this week, I had 2 containers of stuff coming. In fact, I'm still unpacking one as we speak. So this week we had Obsession bows come in. So that's part of the Martin Archery group. Now I paid for that shipment in June last year. So June last year, we're up to now April, end of March it came in. So 9 months. So I paid for it in June, came in March. So the shipment comes in. Let's say it's worth $60,000. It's worth roughly $60,000, maybe more. So the freight for that component, I think, was $10,000. So now I've got $70,000 invested in these bows. Now, what's my chances of selling these bows? Very questionable. So you run them out on special at below cost. Well, I'm not making any money. It takes me 2 hours to sell a bow, so I'm behind. Now, there's some bows in that lineup that may or may not exist currently, and I'm not sure if they do or don't because the Martin and Obsession websites are down. So there's some bows in there that were current last year, and I don't know what's going on this year. So it is what it is. Now the second container I had come in was Bulldog targets. Now Bulldog targets are made in Canada. I paid for those in November last year, and that arrived yesterday. So a container full of targets, which I was unpacking yesterday and today. So today is Saturday. And it's lunchtime, so I'm about to have lunch. But I've been unpacking this morning, and my body hurts. So my body hurt yesterday because they're physically heavy. So you've got to lift them, put them on something, move them somewhere. It takes time to unpack a container full of targets. So we've been moving them to our warehouse, and we've got them in the shop. But physically, it hurts. So it makes archery hard if your body hurts. And now I need to shoot every day to sort of stay reasonable. And the problem is, if you're unpacking a container, your body hurts. So right now, literally my whole body hurts. But I'm saying here hurts, my arms hurt here, shoulders hurt. Back's actually not too bad. A lot of archery is done with your back, between your shoulder blades. So if I draw this bow back, I can feel it all in my arm. I can feel it in my shoulder here. Now my back is pretty good because you don't use a lot of back muscles when you're lifting like heavy objects. So this arm's pretty good. Like I can feel a little bit here because I feel when I lift stuff. It's like I've been going to the gym for basically 4 hours. Which is basically what I have been doing, lifting heavy things, and then you want to go shoot. It's gym and then shooting doesn't work. So one of my friends was in the Australian archery team. He'd go to the gym and he's like, go to shoot. And he goes, I can't shoot the same. No, because your muscles are all fatigued. So it goes back to the original concept of this video, shares. So when you invest all this money in stock, you've got to be able to sell it. And you've got to look at it like, how long is it going to take you to sell it from the time you pay for it to the time you get rid of it to the time you order it again? What's the time period in turnover for that stock? And what percentage are you going to make in it? And that's not straight markup. So if you mark something up 10%, 20%, doesn't mean you make 20% because you've got costs. So in my shop, my wages are 10% of my expenditure. So if I sell $2,000 of archery gear, 10% of that is allocated to wages. So now you've got other expenses obviously in a shop, insurance, which is really expensive, accountant. I'm going to say my accountant. He's going to say, oh, I do most of your stuff for free. Yes, he does, but it's $100 a week, a bit over $100 a week. So you have all these costs associated with running a business, as opposed to just being a salary wage earner. So in my previous life, and I've run an archery shop my entire life, but in my previous life, so my degree's IT, if you sort of didn't know that. So I went to Flinders University, got a degree, did pretty well at uni, did pretty well in IT. So in my previous life, I was like, well, what do I invest money in? And we've already done one on real estate and inflation. Now, shares was one of the things I was always interested in. I was like, well, this is one of the keys to get rich for me. This is going to be a key for me to invest my money into shares. Like, there's a whole but there was TV programs on shares, there's magazines, there's everyone who's going to tell you everything about shares, and I absorbed it all. So I've been watching share markets since I was a kid. I know about dividends. I pretty much know about most of the companies, and I research. And when I research, I mean I research stuff. So I'm going to tell you about some of my share investments, so whether you want to hear or not. So one of the shares I invested in was called China Constructions. So I read a magazine about this company called China Constructions. They own bridges, toll bridges in China. They own apartments in China. They own commercial buildings. Big construction business in China that owns real estate. Now, it was about $1 a share. The magazine's like, this is going to be a big thing. This is going through the roof. It's going to be like, yeah, like you can see like your money doubling and tripling. And whenever you hear that, I'm going to tell you about shares and any type of money investment. There's as many people who say it's going to go up as many people who say it's going to go down, and that's why the price is exactly where it is right now. Anyway, so I read the magazines and all these experts are like, yes, it's going to be a big thing. So I listened to people and I was like, okay, let's invest my money in there. Anyway, next minute the company disappeared. Gone. My money's gone. Okay, so there's China Construction's gone. Now, you might say, well, you're better to invest your money in something more safe than a construction business that owns bridges and toll roads and apartment blocks that rent them out. Okay, China's the problem. Don't invest in China. Okay, right, we've got that. So I invested in a company called Harris Scarfs. You're going to say, what's Harris Scarfs? Harris Scarfs was one of maybe the biggest department store. So that's a store that sells clothes and kitchen supplies and pretty much anything you can think of, toys, electronic goods in this state, South Australia. So they've been here for 100 years, listed on the stock exchange, and their growth had been massive. In fact, so big that it expanded to the rest of Australia. So it was all up. Everything was great. The projection was like skyrocketing. Earnings per share was going up. The dividends were great, like 8%. So I invested a whole bunch of money in Harris Scarfs. Guess what happened? The directors of the company, I don't know, but they did some dodgy stuff and the company went broke. Now, what was interesting about Harris Scarf going broke, and they've been broke a couple of times, is they keep trading. So I'm not sure what happens, but they're no longer listed on the stock exchange and all my money is gone. So that's Harris Scarfs. But Harris Scarf continues to trade, so I think they sold to someone, but basically some dodgy stuff happened. I think they may have gone to jail. I don't know, because the company just disappears, although all the stores are still there. The stores are a little bit different today. They're more of a discount department store. They closed down most of their outlets across Australia. They still exist in this state, South Australia. And they're a reasonable size, but not like they were when I invested in them. So they clearly did have some financial problems, and that's my department store experience. Now, I do have good experiences with shares as well. But anyway, that was Harris Scarfs. It was predicted to be huge, and the growth was going to be massive, and it's like, and gone. Okay, so I brought some shares in some medical companies, so biopharmaceutical companies. Now, when you select biopharmaceutical companies to invest in, it's like, what are you going to invest in? There's a big portfolio. You can go and look into the company and see about what they invest in and what they research. Now, in Australia, we've got really smart people. There's a whole bunch of really smart people, and they generally don't get paid much to work on bio research and medical stuff. It's just the way it is in South Australia. When South Australia and Australia, they generally don't get paid a lot. So I was like, this is a good thing to invest in. So I invested in two companies. So the first one was called PepTech. They did like blood research stuff. So using your blood to deliver medical stuff to parts of the body. And anyway, so the reason I invested in them was they did asthma research, and I've got asthma, so I was like, well, this is a good thing to invest in. So I invested in PepTech. The other company I invested in was Virax. Now, Virax also do asthma research, but they did AIDS research. So they were trying to come up with a solution for HIV, for AIDS. Virax, so they were like 20 cents a share. Anyway, they were doing research on AIDS. So they actually cure AIDS. Cured, fixed, no more AIDS. And this is years ago. And you're like, well, Stephen, there's still AIDS, but they cured it, right? They cured it in monkeys. They cured AIDS in monkeys. This is Virax, right? Anyway, their share price, once they found out they cured AIDS in monkeys, this is a few years ago, and you're going to say, how many years ago was it? I'm going to guess I was around 30, so about 22 years ago. 22 years ago, they cured AIDS in monkeys. So their share price was 20 cents a share. Goes to 40 cents, goes to 80 cents, goes to $1.20, goes to $2. And I'm like, what stage do I get out of this company? My shares have just gone 10 times. When do I go, look, let's just take some profit and just let's bail out of this company? Anyway, I'm like, well, where could this go to? Like, if you cure AIDS, how much is it worth? Now, the problem with curing something and treating something is two different things. If you cure it, that means you don't need to spend money on it again. If you treat something, it means there's continual revenue coming in. Anyway, I don't know if you're going to know where Virax went, but let's cut to the trace. Anyway, Virax, they needed to go to human trials. So this is one of the problems with pharmaceutical companies. They do their research and they might sell off part of their research to another bigger company, and then they start their research on a different strain. So basically this is what happened with Virax. They had to go to human trials for AIDS, for the cure of AIDS, to see, basically whether it cured AIDS, what the side effects were, whether your arms dropped off, whether you got heart attacks or whatever. Anyway, they needed more money, so they had a thing where they asked shareholders to invest more in the company so they can go to human trials. In the meantime, I think they sold off part of their research on the AIDS, so whatever it was they came up with, the patents, to a bigger pharmaceutical company. So that was gone. They basically never got through to human trials, never happened, and the share price today is basically it's gone. So it went from $2 and then it gradually just went poof. And as soon as they sold their patents and all that to the big pharmaceutical group, it just disappeared. Now, PepTech, I had to sell. So I had to sell when I went through a divorce, which was a bit... I had to decide. I had to sell either Virax or I had to sell PepTech. At the time, Virax hadn't come up with a cure for AIDS, and PepTech had done some good things and had gone 4 times my value. So I actually had to sell it because I got divorced and I needed money. So I sold that one. That one has actually grown, I don't know where it is today, but it actually went further. But then after the divorce, this Virax thing went through the roof, and I'm like, whoa! And then I was like, I lost all the money. So there's 3 lots of money I've lost so far. So I also invested in the bank. So the bank I bank with, I brought shares in. So I was like, well, they're a big bank. They were one of the biggest banks in Australia, National Australia Bank. I was like, well, you've got a whole bunch of banks you can choose from: Commonwealth Bank, ANZ Bank, St. George Bank, a whole bunch of banks you can invest in. So I thought, let's invest in the bank I bank with. They were pretty good. Let's throw some money in there. So I put money in there. 10 years later, the share price has not moved. 20 years later, the share price hasn't moved. 30 years later, the share price has not moved. What's happened is the other banks, so if I'd invested in like other banks like Commonwealth Australia Bank, my money would be now 4 times what it was when I invested it. But National Australia Bank is kind of done nothing in forever. There's a whole bunch of reasons as far as I'm concerned why that occurs. When I started, they were really, really helpful with my business, and I'd see my business banker all the time. He'd come out and go, "Hi, how's business? What's going on? Can we lend you more money? How do we need to structure things differently?" Now I don't even see a business banker. So it's like I can't even get a loan because my banker was in a different state. I think after 2 to 3 years of fighting, I think my banker has now been moved to this state. I haven't met them yet, but I still don't have a loan with them. So I actually got my loan through a different bank. So 30 years on, National Australia Bank is trading at the same as it was 30 years ago. It pays a dividend of about 4% per year. That's like bank interest. And it's really done nothing. And one of my problems with banks is they pay their executives lots of money, like millions and millions of dollars, and they pay lots of people lots of money to be really bright, and the share price is going nowhere and the company's not growing. So as a result, from my perspective, most of the profits are going to the executive and not to the shareholders. So that's my experience with National Australia Bank. Then there's this other bank that I brought into. This other bank is called The Rock. So it's called The Rock. It's Rockhampton Building Society I brought into. I hope that's right. I'm pretty sure it is. So anyway, they're a small bank in regional Queensland, and I've got houses there. So I was like, well, it seems like a good spot. There's an international airport. There's lots of farming. It's a hub for meat in Australia. They've got private hospitals. They've got public hospitals. It seems to me like a good spot to invest money in. Now, I invested a lot of money into this bank. They were paying a dividend of about 8%. Now, back at the time, and this is when I'm probably around 30, mid-30s, I'm like, if I invest $1 million into this bank, which is paying back a dividend of about 8%, bank interest back then was probably costing me about 5%, so I was making 3% for doing absolutely nothing. So to me, it was a no-brainer. Like, should have invested into it. So I started investing quite heavily into this bank, and I actually move up the shareholder stakes. Now, to actually move on to the board, I needed $1 million worth of shares, which I could have got through taking out loans. Now, if I move on to a board position in the bank, you might say, well, it's all delusional and that's okay, but I needed $1 million. So I work out, well, number of shares allocated. And again, it's a small bank, regional Queensland, okay? So it's small. I'll never be able to move on to a board of National Australia Bank. It's never going to happen. But a small regional bank. Anyway, if you can move on to the board of the bank, you'll earn between 100 and 200,000. I'm like, well, for a $1 million investment, I'll earn the dividends, which are going to be like 8%, so 80 grand a year, less my borrowings, which were 50,000, let's say, a year. So I'm making 30 grand there. But then I also earn, from being on the board, another 150,000. Now, what could I contribute to the bank? Okay, so anyway, so this was one of my thinkings at the time before I brought archery equipment, was I was going to retire into Queensland and, be on the board and buy houses and retire up there, and maybe do something with hospitals or something. So that was my thinking in my 30s. So anyway, the Rock Building Society was actually sold to Westpac. One of the big banks brought it. So a lot of the big banks started buying the little banks because they were really good. They turned over lots of money in their small towns. So the big banks came and brought them, and basically I sold my shares. How much money did I make? Not much. But I did get my money back, and it wasn't a bad thing. But I never moved onto the board. I basically brought archery gear. For bad or for worse. So I did have some other shares. I'm trying to think of what they were. I've got shares. I think I've got shares in like supermarkets. I may have invested in some hospital stuff. But basically, I was pretty much across. I invested in the paint company, Wattle. Oh boy, that was a bad one. So my boss at work. He goes, invest in Wattle. They make paints. They make really good paint, right? So they make really good paint in Australia. And he goes, invest in Wattle. It's been really good for me. So I just blindly put some money in Wattle. Anyway, 10 years later, Wattle has only decreased in value, and that was a dead investment. So when people say, look, you should do that, take it with a grain of salt. But always listen and take stuff in is my advice. So this goes back to my whole thing on shares. So my experience with shares, there was a company called Dick Smith. So Dick Smith is a wealthy Australian. He set up an electronics business, if you don't know, and if you're in America. Anyway, he's a wealthy guy. Didn't do very well at school. He was like bottom 2 students in the school. So like not doing very well at school. Anyway, he got into electronics and set up these stores which sell electronic stuff, became big, gets brought by one of the big companies in Australia called Woolworths. They buy Dick Smith. Dick Smith's out of electronics, but he's one of the wealthiest men in Australia because Woolworths brought all his businesses. Okay. So Dick Smith then gets sold off to another group of people from Woolworths. These group of people go, well, what we're going to do is we're going to build it, and they're going to list the company on the share market, which they do. They list it on the share market, and share price goes through the roof. But what these people do, the share price goes, what these people do is they took out lots of loans and owed people lots of money. And basically, the shareholders didn't know the company was basically broke because they'd sold off all their stock, and all the new stock they brought in they hadn't paid for, so it looked good on the books, but within a year that company was broke. And all the shareholders, everything was lost, all the staff, thousands of staff out of business in Australia. So this is my experience with shares. So with shares, to me, it's a bit of a roll of the dice. Is Microsoft is obviously one of the big companies. I remember saying to my friend in IT, who's an accountant, I said, can someone challenge Microsoft? Or are they just going to be the dominant player forever and the share price is justified? And this is back when I was 30, so 20 years ago. Now, 25 years ago, the department I worked in did not choose Microsoft as a software provider. They chose Lotus for their word processing, their Excel spreadsheets. No, we had the Lotus spreadsheets, and their mail system was all Lotus. So the IT person in charge said, we're not going to go with Microsoft as a solution, we're going to go with Lotus. So, sometimes you go wonder how smart the leaders are of these companies. They're obviously not with they're obviously with Microsoft now, but as everyone else is. But at the time, it was like, is Microsoft always going to be the dominant player? Is Amazon always going to be the dominant player? Does the Tesla share price justify its means to be worth more than all the car companies put together, basically? Does it justify that price? Does it justify it's going to be a huge company in the future? So, when you've got money, like you're working a job and you've got money to invest, you're like, do I invest it in an archery business? Do I invest it into real estate, or do I invest it into shares? That's a question you've got to take as an owner of an archery shop, or whether you work. So if you've got a wage, you've got to say, look, do I want to set up a business? Do I want to have people run it? Because I had people run my business for me, and obviously I didn't make any money doing that, so that's why I'm running a business now. Or what do I want to do? Now, when you think about these things, as I do, if you own an archery business, you've got to say, how much do I pay myself? And I can tell you how much I pay myself, $0. So I don't pay myself anything. I pay my staff, obviously. But how much would I earn if I went and worked in wherever I went and worked? Well, if I continued working where I was going to be working, I'd be earning about $500,000 a year. If I worked in the public service now, I might earn $100,000 a year. If I could get in, maybe I could, maybe I couldn't. So you've got those sorts of questions. Like, how much would I earn if I could get back in? Now, it's been a while since I worked in the commercial world, I've been working in an archery shop for a while. But now with your stock is an investment. If you had your stock invested in real estate, if you had your stock invested in shares, how much is it worth? If you had your stock invested in Bitcoin, how much is it worth? And this is the stuff you've got to take in consideration. This is what I take in consideration when I've got the Obsession shipment that came in. That'd been 9 months of my money invested. Well, 9 months invested in Bitcoin would have doubled my money. Now, I'll never do that from that Obsession shipment. The Bulldog target that came in, shipment that came in, I will never recover the money I've invested in that thing. It doesn't mean Bulldog's not a good product. It is. It's a fantastic product. And it doesn't mean my decision to buy them was a bad one. Or maybe it is a bad one. We're going to have this argument. So if you run a business, you've got to say, do I want to grow it? If I want to grow it, then I need to do these things. I need to bring in new stock. I need to bring costs down. I need to be this way in the marketplace. By me bringing Bulldog targets in, the only way my competitors compete with that is to bring Bulldog targets in as well. And that's going to be 6 months of them investing their money. They then need a place to store it, so they need a warehouse to store it, which costs money. And it's going to take them so long to recover the thing. Now, if they don't, that means everyone will be buying Bulldog targets from me. And you might say, well, there's other targets. There are, but actually right now it's very hard to buy targets. There's really not a lot of targets on the market, and Bulldogs are really good quality targets. So, am I pushing Bulldog? No, I sell a whole bunch of different targets, right? So I sell all these different targets, and that's why I bring them in. I bring them in by sea, so we've got them. So basically, anything a consumer can want, we have on stock. The problem I find with the business right now is interest rates are so low, inflation is so high, and it's not the 1 or 2%, which we did that in the last video. It's so high that you would be better to sell all your stock and buy real estate or buy Bitcoin. And that's just craziness, because it's a viable business, and whether how viable it is a question mark. But it's a business that people have got a demand for a product, which I have, and you can mark it up. Whether it's marked up enough is another question, but there's a viable business there for someone who wants it. The problem is, with mass inflation going up, the cost of freight going up, so those Bulldog targets cost me $13,000 to freight in from Canada. So $13,000. It's like, when I went to import them, so back in November, I think, when I went to import them, I was looking at about $5,000. $13,000 is like, God. To mention the 4 months to get them in. It's just like, so I've got to price them up. So this weekend I'll be pricing them up and putting them online, and fingers crossed they sell. But when they sell, then you've got to get another shipment in. So the whole process repeats itself. So like right now I'm getting low on Fastgo targets. So now I've got to plan for another Fastgo container to come in. So this gets back to the whole shop business. If you're a shop owner, how many targets do you want to have in stock? And what's really good if you're a shop, I'm going to say in America, if you're a shop in America, if you can buy off a wholesaler those targets cheap and get them to your business at a low cost, it means you don't need to stock lots of targets. You can get away with 2 or 3 targets. I'm not sure how getting Bulldog targets from Canada into America is, but I would say to an American person or a Canadian person, you probably don't want to buy a container of Bulldog targets, because to unload them is probably looking at about 2 days. How they pack those things is amazing. They obviously have a bunch of Chinese people working for them, because they are elite at packing these things. And I don't know, the really heavy targets, they slit up the top, and I don't know how they slide stuff, because they're wrapped in shrink wrap, which is just sticky. So unless they're all massive blokes, I'm going to say massive people, they're just, my body is just killing me from unpacking them. Anyway, so on shares, that's my whole thing with shares. So with shares, my view is, you might hit a winner, but there's so much money now going to the executive there's so much money going to the upper management, it's very hard for me to see how there's money profit left over for shareholders. Competition's tight, so unless they're in a unique market, like I'm going to say Tesla, but Tesla is not in a unique market. China is making electric cars, which haven't even been released yet. Every other company is starting to produce electric cars. You might say they're not as good as Tesla, and I'll absolutely agree with you. But the thing with the other companies, they have service. And service is a very good thing. So this car behind me here, it needs a new plug for the trailer, for the caravan, so I can go away. I paid to have it fixed. It's not fixed, and I've been waiting weeks and weeks. To take this car to get serviced takes me 2 months to book it in to get serviced. To replace a radiator hose with a little hole in it, which has been replaced 3 times so far since I've owned it, $400. Craziness. And you've got to, it takes time to get these things fixed. So anyway, with that, I'll leave you with shares. I'm going to talk about what I'm doing at the moment with Bitcoin. In one of the latest videos, and some of the things I'm investing in, things I'm doing in my business to make it more profitable. So I'm going to go back to shooting, try and go and eat some lunch. I'm Stephen Hand from Archery Supplies. Thanks for watching. Bye.